Hey everybody, FarFetched here. It's been a while since I've made a video, but I'd like to talk about the difference that I've noticed between two different types of artists. Now, not all artists fall into this categorization. In fact, it tends to be a pretty small subset of artists. Most artists, I'd say, fall somewhere in between. But the two artists I have dubbed the fluid artist and the fixated artist. Starting with the fluid artist tends to be restless. They tend to move around a lot in the subjects, the tone, just the things that they do with their artwork. At the most extreme cases, these are people who are constantly hopping from medium to medium, constantly making things that portray different emotions, that are essentially wholly disparate from each other. And a lot of people idolize this type of artist because they don't box themselves in, because they're able to do essentially whatever they want. And these are the type of artists that tend to be innovators. These are the types of people that break new ground within a medium, but then probably don't stick around to explore that further. They're off doing new things. As a less extreme example, people who generally stay within the same medium, like let's say for a visual artist or somebody who does drawings, these are the types of people who will constantly draw different things. If you follow them on Pixiv or something, the types of things that you're going to get are going to be different every day of the week. Now, I should mention that neither of these types of artists, this categorization does not take into account how often somebody creates art, because that's a completely separate thing, and you could probably make sort of a compass out of this, but maybe I'll explore that in the future. But the fluid artist is often looked up to because they are the people who, in the beginning of their career, if they make something popular, they are praised and they are given tons of accolades for being essentially creative geniuses. But I've noticed that, especially among musicians that fall into this category, unless they fall into the very extreme end of it, they tend to receive less favorable reviews as time goes on. Like, their early stuff might be very well regarded, but then as time goes on and they start to change things up, the same innovations that they were praised for in the beginning, they tend to get sort of criticized for later down the line, because most people generally like things to stay the same among a single artist. But the thing about artists is artists are people, and at the end of the day, people cannot be boxed in. The closest you're going to get to that would be with the fixated artist. This is the type of person who comes to an idea or comes to a subject, and they really get fixated in on it. It is rather self-explanatory. They just tend to do the same thing over and over again. And I tend to fall into this category as an artist, although my scope of things that I create does tend to vary. I'm not an extreme example of it, but an extreme example of it would be somebody who stays within the same medium their entire artistic career and only ever really draws the same thing, or only ever really creates the same thing. You see a lot of this in the porn art community. It's very prevalent there, because generally people there have fetishes, and when you have a fetish, you stick to it, I guess. I'm not really sure the rationale behind it, or what causes this difference, but a fixated artist, I wish I could come up with an example off the top of my head to help solidify this, but I think I will put some links in the description to both types of these artists. There's probably going to be NSFW, so avert your eyes. But if you're on this channel, I don't think you care. But there's one artist in particular that sort of spurred this idea in my head. I don't know his name, but he will be the example that I put in the description. He draws this really skinny girl. I think her name is like Akame-chan. And basically, it's the same drawing every single time. It's the same girl she's really skinny, in the same bikini. Occasionally he changes up the setting, or, obviously everything that's happening in the picture tends to be different, because to draw the exact same picture would be a little bit insane. I don't think anybody is that insane, although I'm sure somebody out there is like that. But generally, this type of person is regarded as not necessarily being less creative, but they're not regarded as highly, or they're not necessarily seen in the same limelight as the fluid artist. Because this type of artist is very often taken for granted, I'd say. They're sort of taken for granted in the sense that the audience expects something from them. And because they expect something from them, and because this artist is always going to put out what they expect from them, because that's what they're fixated on, this type of artist tends to not necessarily have anything that really makes them jump out, because from the moment you discover them, maybe to you it might be revolutionary, but the more you see of it, the less exciting it becomes. Generally, I prefer this type of artist, as I think most people generally do. I think a lot of people look up to the fluid artist, but I think a lot of people actually prefer, as consumers, the fixated artist, because it gives them what they expect, and people like what they expect. I think it's a very admirable thing to do, because, a fluid artist is constantly changing things up, but the fixated artist is the one who is going to be making developments. They're the ones who are going to be furthering along a specific idea. The fluid artist might present that idea, but it's the fixated artist who perfects it. The more I think about this, though, the more I start to realize that maybe it isn't two types of artists. One thing I was thinking was, it's actually two processes of the artistic or creative endeavor. Fixation and creation. That's one way of putting it, I suppose. Every artist has new ideas. Every artist gets stuck on certain ideas, and once they get past that idea, then they move on to creation again. It's cyclical. It's a cycle. It's a cycle of creation, I'd say. And some people tend to fall more towards one side than the other. I'd say the fluid artist is just somebody who is satisfied very easily by a new idea, whereas a fixated artist is somebody who really has to get to the heart of what this idea, what makes that idea appealing to them. So I've noticed that in my art, this tends to be the case, in the sense that, for a while there, I was fixated on hentai, and I still am, although I'm starting to reach the end of that fixation, I think. I'm starting to reach the point where I've said most of the things that I want to say about that medium. There's certainly more to be said, but I think I've almost reached the point where I've said everything I need to say about it. I think I could make maybe 1-2 more videos. I have another video that I'm working on right now, and by working on, I mean it's still in the scripting phase, as it has been for the past 8 months, because I lack motivation, I suppose. But it's closer to being done than ever. And past that, I really don't have any ideas for anything else I could say within the medium. And I think some ideas go a lot deeper than others. I think hentai, as a medium, has a lot of room for depth individually on a work-by-work basis. But I think as a whole, the medium itself only has so much that it can offer. Nothing that I've said in my videos, I think, undercuts that fact. I think I've always said that hentai has a lot of room for depth, but I don't think the medium as a whole is necessarily a deep medium. Just that it has the capability of it. That's essentially the fixation that I had gotten into for the past couple of years, was trying to explore that idea. And I'm pretty much satisfied with how far I've explored it thus far. But there's a few more things that I want to say. And this next video that is going to come out, I think, is going to be a culmination of that. But beyond that, I think more ideas that I've been having. There's another idea that I've been starting a fixation on, and that is the determination of quality. And I will explore that in another video that probably should come out sooner. So I think that if my videos ever go anywhere, if I actually decide to pick up production, I don't know if it's necessarily a decision that I make, although it could be. I think it's more to do with, am I in the right headspace? Because recently I just haven't been in the right headspace. It's been very difficult to find that motivation. But I think once I do, you'll start to see my content head in a new direction, I think. Not a very drastic direction, because I'm just going to be talking about anime instead of hentai. And maybe that means that I'll get less views, because my anime content tends to get less views, because it's a much more saturated market. But at the end of the day, I'm not making content for anybody else but myself. I'm only making content to make myself understood. That is the main reason why I even chose this medium to begin with, because I think it's the best way that I can make myself understood. Because the thing about other mediums, and this is getting completely off topic, but I'm going to end the video after I make this point. The thing about other mediums is that other mediums like artwork or music are a lot more vague. And so you can express much deeper emotions or thoughts or feelings. But those feelings or thoughts are going to be less understood by the majority of people. When you describe things in words, in concepts, lexically, you tend to have a greater understanding because everything you're saying is meant to be taken literally. And so that's why I chose this medium, is because one of my main fixations is to be understood as an artist. Some artists don't care about being understood. They just want to express. And I think that's another big part of the artistic process. The whole artistic process as a whole is strange. It's very complex. There's a lot that goes into it. And I don't know the psychology behind it all. I'm merely talking about my observations, the things that I've seen and the things that I've felt as an artist and as a consumer of art. I don't have anything else to say on this subject, so I think I'm going to wrap it up here. Thanks for watching. Support me on Patreon if you don't mind lots of breaks, but I wouldn't blame you if you decide not to.